Welcome to the debate. Imagine the person who invented the modern internal combustion engine, the foundational technology powering all the world's transportation.
The absolute bedrock of the industry.
Exactly. Now imagine that person suddenly standing up right at the absolute peak of the automotive boom to declare, this is a dead end.
It would be, well, it would be unthinkable.
It would. But in 2026, Yann LeCun, a Turing Award winner, the so-called godfather of AI, and the chief architect behind Meta's artificial intelligence for over a decade, has effectively done exactly that.
Yeah, he really has.
He's bet $3.5 billion that the large language models powering the tools we use every single day are a fundamental dead end for human-level intelligence.
Which is a staggering claim to make right now.
Right, and he has left Meta, formed AMI Labs, and raised $1.03 billion, which happens to be Europe's largest seed round in history.
A massive, massive amount of capital.
So the central question before us today is this. Is LeCun's objective-driven AI the necessary paradigm shift to move artificial intelligence from, mere text prediction to true reasoning?
Or conversely, is it a fragile, hyper-funded theoretical construct that, frankly, prematurely dismisses the continued potential of large language models?
Right, that is the core of it. I will argue that LeCun's architecture provides the necessary mathematically sound path beyond the limitations of generative AI, which by its very design cannot truly understand the physical world.
And I will argue that the empirical fragility of his models, combined with the profound tension of, massive commercial pressures, makes this pivot highly speculative. Abandoning a proven LLM paradigm for an unproven framework is just a profound risk.
Okay, so to really grasp the magnitude of this shift, we have to pull back the curtain and look at the foundational mechanics of what the entire industry has been building for the last several years.
The generative models.
Yes. The whole tech world has been obsessed with a single, highly optimized trick, which is predicting the next word in a sequence. That is the core function of an LLM.
And it works incredibly well for a lot of things.
It does. It produces systems that are astonishingly useful for summarizing your emails or writing boilerplate code. But predicting the next word does not equate to understanding the physical world.
No, it definitely doesn't.
An LLM doesn't have an internal model of reality. It just has a statistical map of human language.
Right. It knows that the word apple is very often followed by the word falls. But it doesn't actually understand gravity.
Exactly. It's a statistical parlor trick on a massive scale. And that is why LeCun's objective-driven AI, and specifically the JEPA model, the Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture, is such a revolutionary departure.
Because it abandons the text prediction entirely.
Right. Instead of trying to generate the next word, or, in the case of video generation, predict every single pixel in an image, JEPA focuses on predicting the outcomes of actions in a much more abstract way.
It filters out the noise.
Yes, it learns to ignore irrelevant details. Think about a baby learning about gravity in a real room. When a baby drops a toy, it learns that the object falls to the floor. It doesn't track, every single dust particle illuminated by the sunlight in the room.
Generative AI essentially tries to predict all those dust particles.
Generative AI fundamentally tries to predict the dust particles. JEPA learns the gravity. It builds a true world model. LeCun's departure from Meta in November 2025 wasn't just some career move. It was a necessary intellectual schism.
He clearly felt he hit a wall.
He recognized that LLMs fundamentally lack the capacity to reason or plan, and you simply cannot iterate your way out of a foundational flaw.
Well, we must absolutely acknowledge his towering pedigree here. I mean, we are talking about a researcher who has been at NYU since 2003, the founder of their Center for Data Science, Modern Computer Vision. His contributions to the field are unquestionable. But I have to question this absolute categorical dismissal of large language models.
Why? The structural limits are mathematically provable.
Because there is a glaring, uncomfortable gap right now between elegant mathematical theory and messy empirical reality. LeCun claims LLMs are a dead end, yet his own alternative is currently incredibly fragile.
Fragile in early testing, yes, but
Extremely fragile. We are looking at a profound contradiction here. You are asking the industry to abandon a proven, highly useful paradigm that is currently driving global economic productivity in favor of an unproven world model architecture.
It's not about abandoning it for everyday trivial tasks, though. It's about what happens when you need actual reliability.
Reliability is exactly what I'm questioning.
But if we want systems we can trust, LeCun's theory is non-negotiable. The reason LLMs hallucinate, the reason they confidently invent historical facts or completely fail basic physical logic puzzles, is precisely because they lack this grounding in physical reality.
They are trapped in language.
They are free-floating in a sea of language. If we are going to deploy AI in high-stakes environments, zero hallucination, objective-driven systems are not a luxury. They are critical.
Okay, but
Look at AMI Lab's first deployment partner. It's Nabla, a digital health startup. You cannot have an LLM hallucinating a medical diagnosis just because a statistical weight favored a plausible-sounding but lethal string of text.
I agree that medical applications require zero hallucinations. That's obvious. But how does JPA actually guarantee that?
Because the theory behind JEPA is mathematically provable.
On paper?
Well, if you look at the preprint La JEPA published in May of 2026, the team provided a formal mathematical proof that these models can recover hidden variables through what they call linear identifiability.
Right, the linear identifiability paper.
Yes, if the underlying dynamics have additive noise and Gaussian distributions, the model doesn't just guess what's happening, it mathematically isolates the true underlying state of the world from raw, noisy observations.
That is a big if, though.
But it's a rigorous, foundational guarantee that an autoregressive LLM simply cannot ever offer.
Wait, let's break that down for a second. When you say additive noise and Gaussian distributions, what does that actually look like for a health startup trying to diagnose a patient?
It's just a way of modeling uncertainty.
Because, Bisan, listening to this, I need to know how that specific math guarantees the AI won't hallucinate a fake symptom.
That's a fair question. Let's simplify it. Imagine you are looking at a patient's heart monitor, but there's a bunch of static on the screen because the sensors are cheap.
Okay, I'm with you.
That static is the additive noise. A Gaussian distribution just means that the static follows a predictable, normal bell curve. Most of the static is minor, with very few massive spikes.
Makes sense.
So what linear identifiability means is that the AI doesn't just look at the static and guess what the heart is doing. The math actually allows the system to completely separate the predictable static from the true underlying heartbeat.
It filters it out mathematically.
It strips away the noise to find the absolute truth of the system. An LLM can't do that. An LLM just looks at the static and the heartbeat together, scrambles it with everything it's ever read about hearts, and spits out the most statistically likely sentence.
Right.
LeCun's system actually isolates the true state of reality.
I understand the mechanism, but I have to push back hard on that. You just described a scenario where the static is perfectly predictable, like a neat little bell curve.
It represents the noise in the system.
But the real world is neither purely Gaussian nor stationary. It is chaotic. And you don't even have to look outside of LeCun's own team to see the problem with extrapolating a mathematical proof under highly constrained conditions into real-world supremacy.
Are you talking about the benchmark?
Yes. The very same month, May 2026, they published a companion benchmark called Stable World Model.
The robustness benchmark, yes.
Exactly. And what did that benchmark actually reveal? It found that these world model architectures, including LeCun's, suffer severe, pronounced collapse from minor visual perturbations.
It's an early model.
We are talking about a scenario where the background of an image changes from blue to red, or a shadow falls across an object, and the model's internal representation completely shatters. It forgets what a table is because the lighting changed.
That is a bit of an exaggeration.
To use an analogy, La JEPA is currently like a perfectly engineered multi-million-dollar Formula One race car.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It is theoretically flawless. Its aerodynamics are mathematically proven to be perfect, but it only works on a sealed, climate-controlled, frictionless track.
Well,
The exact moment it hits a real-world pothole, a shadow, a change in lighting, a visual perturbation, the axle snaps. You are telling the medical field through Nabla to trust a system that literally breaks if the background color changes, simply because the math on the frictionless track is elegant.
I think the race car analogy is brilliant, honestly, but it actually proves my point entirely.
How so? The axle snapped.
Yes, the F1 car snaps an axle on a pothole today. That is how fundamental research progresses. You isolate the variable, you prove the physics of lift or speed, and then you engineer the suspension to handle the potholes.
But LLMs are driving on the dirt roads today.
The LLM isn't a rugged off-road vehicle navigating the dirt, though. The LLM is a very convincing actor sitting in an arcade simulator, narrating a drive it isn't actually taking.
That's a bit harsh.
It sounds like it knows the road, but it literally doesn't know what a road is. When you encounter a novel situation, like a washed-out bridge, the LLM will confidently tell you to drive off the cliff because driving forward is the most statistically common next phrase in its dataset.
But the LLM is actually driving cars today. It's writing code that compiles today.
Through brute force memorization, not reasoning. The collapse in the stable world model benchmark you mentioned is a known measurable engineering hurdle. In the literature, they call it the problem of scaling the invariance in the joint embedding space.
Hold on, scaling the invariance? For anyone who isn't writing machine learning papers all day, you just mean making sure the AI doesn't completely panic and forget what a car is just because it's parked in the shade, right?
Exactly. Invariance just means the core concept remains the same even if the superficial details change. A car is a car, whether it's red or blue, in the sun or the shade.
And JEPA struggles with that.
Right now, JEPA struggles to maintain that invariance when things get messy. But that is an engineering problem. It is solvable with better training techniques. The inability of an LLM to reason, however, is not an engineering hurdle. It is a structural impossibility.
Because of the autoregressive nature.
Yes! An autoregressive model, a model that generates one word at a time, cannot plan a complex hierarchical sequence of actions in the physical world.
It gets locked into its own text generation.
Exactly. If it makes a subtle logical error on word number 4, it mathematically cannot backtrack and correct its internal state by the time it reaches word number 40 without explicit external prompting from a human. It's locked in.
Whereas JEPA, by contrast, pauses, simulates multiple potential futures in its abstract world model, evaluates them against the objective, and then acts. LeCun is playing the long game here.
Okay, so if the math is as flawless as you say, but the model shatters the moment you change a background color, why are some of the most cutthroat investors in the world, like Bezos Expeditions, throwing $1 billion at it?
Because they see the architectural advantage.
They don't fund 20-year science experiments. They fund products. Which brings us to a massive contradiction. Let's look at the clash between LeCun's academic fundamentals and his new corporate reality.
I wouldn't call it a contradiction. LeCun has incredibly deep roots at NYU. He was the speaker at the 2026 Tandan graduation, and he has been vocally, passionately advising academia to abandon LLMs.
Which they should.
His argument is that the real breakthroughs, like the attention mechanism that originally came out of the University of Montreal, will come from pure foundational academic research on world models, entirely free from big tech's obsession with brute force computing scale.
That's a vital point. He is trying to protect the academic ecosystem from a feudal arms race. Universities cannot compete with a tech giant that has a cluster of 100,000 GPUs.
Right.
They need to focus on architecture, not scale.
I have to admit, I really struggle to square the circle. He tells universities to stay pure, slow, and fundamental. Yet he just took over $1 billion in a seed round from Bezos Expeditions, NVIDIA, Cathay Innovation, and Greycroft.
It takes capital to build models.
These are venture capitalists and corporate titans. They are not philanthropic entities funding slow academic discovery. They expect massive, paradigm-shifting commercial returns, and they expect them quickly to justify a $3.5 billion valuation.
That's the nature of the industry.
So I have to ask, is AMI Labs truly this pure haven for fundamental research, or is it just another hyper-capitalized startup that will inevitably be forced to rush commercialization before the proverbial axle is fixed?
You are framing it as a contradiction, but it's actually a necessary synthesis. The reality of modern AI is that even foundational architectural shifts require immense compute to prove out at scale.
$1 billion worth of compute?
Yes, you cannot test a global world model on a laptop in a university basement anymore. LeCun recognized that to build systems like VJEPA 2, which by the way, has 1.2 billion parameters and learns from vast amounts of raw video data without any human supervision or labeling, you need NVIDIA hardware.
You need the GPUs.
You need capital. But the ethos of the research remains strictly academic.
How can the ethos remain academic when you have a multi-billion-dollar gun to your head demanding a return on investment?
Because of his aggressive, uncompromising stance on open source, which completely flies in the face of standard hyper-capitalist tech monopolies.
Open source is his shield.
If this were a purely commercial cash grab, AME Labs would lock their models behind an expensive API paywall, just like OpenAI or Anthropic. But they aren't. They are open sourcing the weights.
And that is exactly where we need to pivot, because his stance on open source introduces an entirely different and frankly terrifying matrix of geopolitical risks.
It is central to his entire philosophy. Look at his speech at the UN Open Source Week in June 2026. He explicitly framed closed AI models as a form of AI colonialism.
I remember the speech.
If we rely entirely on LLMs locked behind API paywalls by companies heavily concentrated on the US West Coast or in China, we are handing over the mediation of all human-digital interaction to a massive oligopoly.
It's a huge concentration of power.
It threatens global cultural and linguistic diversity. By championing open-source world models, LeCun is advocating for a federated ecosystem. A country, a local government, or an academic institution can digitize its own culture and train its own models.
I understand the theory.
And he is not alone in this. Heavyweights across the entire spectrum, Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton, Fei-Fei Li, Andrew Ng, they all agree that concentrating this kind of power in a few closed labs is far riskier than democratizing it.
Because you get more eyes on the code.
Exactly. Open source allows thousands of independent researchers to audit the code, find the vulnerabilities, and improve the system collectively.
I hear the democratic appeal of that argument. It sounds noble, it sounds democratic. But we are not talking about open sourcing a new web browser or a basic operating system here.
We are talking about intelligence.
We are talking about open sourcing a system that, according to LeCun's own roadmap, will eventually achieve human-level intelligence and possess a deep, causal understanding of the physical world.
Yes, that's the goal.
Sam Altman characterized the release of models like the 405 billion parameter Llama 3 as reckless, and I believe that characterization holds significant weight here. If LeCun succeeds, if he actually builds an objective-driven AI that truly plans, reasons, and understands the physics of reality, open sourcing those weights is a terrifying prospect.
Why? Because it breaks the monopoly of a few wealthy tech executives?
No, because it allows malicious state actors to strip away safety guardrails entirely. Let's think about the difference in architecture. Releasing a text generator is one thing.
Right.
If an open-source LLM hallucinates a recipe for a bioweapon, it is still just text on a screen. A human being still has to read it, understand it, physically source the materials, and manually execute the plan.
There is a friction barrier.
There is a massive friction barrier between the text and the real world. But an objective-driven AI, by definition, is designed to plan and execute hierarchical actions in the real world to achieve a specific goal.
It is designed to act, yes.
So if you hand the raw weights of a true world model to a bad actor, they don't have to bypass a clever API filter. They have the entire brain.
They have the architecture.
They just rewrite the objective function. They say, here is a malicious objective, plan and execute the steps in the physical world across digital and physical infrastructure to achieve it.
That is a worst-case scenario.
The very capability that makes JEPA superior to an LLM, its ability to actually understand causality and manipulate reality rather than just predicting text, makes it exponentially more dangerous as an open-source primitive. It ceases to be software. It becomes a global security threat.
That is a chilling scenario, I grant you. But your perspective on risk assumes that a closed lab is intrinsically immune to catastrophic failure, manipulation, or breach.
It's more secure than giving it to everyone.
It assumes that security through obscurity is actual security. And in the history of computer science, it never is.
Sometimes it slows people down.
If you build an omnipotent, closed-world model, You have created a single point of failure. If that closed model develops an emergent, misaligned objective, or if it is quietly hacked by an advanced persistent threat from a state actor, the global community has zero visibility into its architecture to stop it.
But we wouldn't have the proliferation of models either.
We wouldn't even know it was compromised until it was too late. LeCun's argument, which is deeply rooted in the history of cryptography and software engineering, is that transparent systems are robust systems.
But how does transparency stop a rogue actor who simply downloaded the model and removed the safety rails?
You defeat the malicious use of a world model by having a global ecosystem of thousands of benign world models that are collectively smarter, faster, and better resourced.
A model against model scenario.
Yes, models that can detect, outplan, and neutralize the threat in real time. You don't hide the math in a vault. You democratize the defense. That is how the internet's security infrastructure works today.
That makes perfect sense in a lab. But out in the wild, hoping that the good open source models will simply outplan a bad open source model in real time sounds less like a coherent security strategy and more like an uncontrollable digital arms race playing out in our critical infrastructure.
It's an ecosystem approach.
And honestly, we circle right back to the empirical reality. We are sitting here debating the geopolitical implications of an omnipotent world model, but the actual model AMI Labs has today collapses if the background color changes from blue to red.
That is just an iteration.
The disconnect between the rhetoric of a $3.5 billion valuation and the reality of the stable world model benchmark is just vast. It feels like we are definitively declaring cars dead before we have even figured out how to make the airplane take off in a crosswind.
But the Wright brothers didn't abandon the concept of the airplane just because the wind blew and they crashed a few prototypes.
Fair point.
They understood the fundamental physics of lift were correct, whereas a carriage attached to a horse would never fly, no matter how fast you bred the horse to run. The generative LLM is the horse.
A very, very productive horse.
It is incredibly fast. It is highly optimized, and it is currently carrying the entire industry on its back. But it will never achieve liftoff into true reasoning. It just doesn't have wings.
And JEPA does?
Despite the current empirical fragility you rightly point out, objective-driven AI represents the only mathematically rigorous path to systems that actually understand causality. The proof of linear identifiability in JEPA shows us the physics of intelligence are sound.
In theory.
And maintaining an open-source approach to this research, ensuring that institutions like NYU and independent researchers worldwide can actually participate in building the future, is the best mechanism we have to audit the technology and prevent a dystopian digital monopoly.
Look, it is a beautiful theory, but the history of artificial intelligence is littered with beautiful, mathematically perfect theories that shattered upon contact with the messiness of the real world.
We have to push through the mess. While LeCun's theoretical framework for objective-driven AI is incredibly elegant, the empirical evidence of model collapse cannot be simply brushed aside as a mere engineering hurdle.
It's a solvable one.
Furthermore, the paradox of attempting to conduct slow, pure, fundamental research under the glaring, impatient pressure of a billion-dollar commercial seed round warrants deep skepticism. To unilaterally declare the end of the large language model era, when LLMs are actively solving real problems every day, in favor of a system that currently struggles with basic visual noise, is a gamble of historic proportions. It is a gamble, undoubtedly, but 2026 will be remembered as a definitive schism in the philosophy of artificial intelligence. We have reached the upper limits of what predicting the next word can achieve for true cognition, and the field is fracturing into two distinct, irreconcilable visions of the future.
And if you are listening to this, wondering which side of the schism will hold up, the best thing to do is look past the valuation headlines and monitor AMI Lab's actual real-world deployments.
Keep an eye on Nabla.
Exactly. Watch what happens with Nabla. Watch what happens when these frictionless mathematical models actually hit the dirt road of human health and chaotic data. We will see soon enough which philosophy survives contact with reality.
Exactly. When the inventor of the engine tells you the car is a dead end, you don't necessarily have to believe him immediately, but you absolutely have to look at the blueprints of what he is building next. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.